Waiting room, yeah?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, okay.
Just started the live streaming. I need to pin you on the screen. Just started the live streaming. I need to pin you on the screen. Okay. All right, so I think we are gonna get started. Can somebody who's in the chat just give me a thumbs up if you're able to hear me? Okay, okay, great. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Briaan Barron. I'm excited to chat with you for the next hour and give a quick presentation on the fundamentals of digital branding. I'm going to share my screen as we walk through this presentation. And for the first half of our time, I'm going to walk you through some of my best kind of pro tips for branding yourself in the digital space. And then we will spend the second half of our time together opening up for the audience to ask questions about anything that we covered or anything else that you would like to cover that we were not able to get to. So give me 1 second and let me share my screen. And okay, I'm going to assume that folks are able to see that. And please forgive any audio issues. As we all know, we're working from home, so you might hear some construction, but hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. So welcome to my workshop on digital branding fundamentals. I am the founder and CEO of a creative consultancy called Worthi LLC, which I just launched at the beginning of January this year. So this is a new business, but it is a part of a long-time endeavor of mine to teach branding and marketing fundamentals to first-time business owners, nonprofit leaders, and individuals who want to create a compelling brand that suits today's audience. So I'm excited to share some of those tips with you today. Tell you a little bit more about myself. Oops, skipped ahead there. So I am a marketer, a creative director, and a brand strategist. And I primarily work with purpose-driven consumer brands. So what that means is that I focus on partnering with people who care about something deeper than profit and who are looking to make an impact with their work, whether they are doing so in the corporate space, the nonprofit space, or they're an individual creative or entertainer or content creator or public figure. It's the thing that threads the people that I work with together is that common cause to do something that's productive for the greater good. So in addition to the work that I do in the marketing space, I'm also a published writer. I have written scholarly essays on subjects in African American studies and identity representation in media. And I'm currently a Black museum professional since I'm also the marketing director at Northwest African American Museum. In addition to the work that I do with my agency and with the museum, I do a lot of public speaking. I've been a facilitator and a leadership coach for industry executives and leaders and public figures across various categories. So what I love to do is teach people how to tell a compelling story and to do so in a way that is strategic and that drives action. Because ultimately, that's what marketing and branding really is all about, is telling a story in a way that prompts people to take an action, to do what it is that you want them to do, whatever that may be. So that's a little bit about me. What I want to cover with you all today are these three kind of target bullet points, and we'll go into some depth about each one of these as we talk today. The first thing that we're going to talk about is how to strategically define your brand. What does it mean to have a brand? How do you understand your positioning when compared to competitors? And how do you understand, how to articulate the value that you offer to your target audience? So that's one thing that we're going to start the conversation with today. The next thing that we're going to talk about today is how to identify your best options for reaching your audience online. That digital marketing is definitely top of mind for a lot of folks right now, especially since we are all working, many of us are working off of our laptops and devices to stay connected at this time. So we're going to talk about how to understand what your options are for marketing, whatever your endeavor is, through the online space, and how to use that effectively. And then the last thing that we're going to touch on today is how to use social media efficiently and effectively before you invest in digital advertising. So what I mean by that is that we all know that social media is a great marketing tool. It's essential in the 21st century for any sort of brand, whether you're business to business, business to consumer, or you're just an individual. It's an essential platform to use. But there's also a lot of options for spending money in social media to pay for advertisements and to pay for boosted posts. And I always like to encourage people to first learn how to navigate that space organically, and to really engage with your community and your audience organically before you start spending money on social media. So that is the last thing that we're going to talk about today. And then I'm going to hand it over to you for questions once we get to that part. So if you're still with me, I'm going to keep going. I always like to start the conversation about defining your brand with a comparison between what marketing is versus what branding is. These are two terms that are often used interchangeably. They're often used in conversation with each other, but it's really important to understand the different functions that they serve as you're creating a marketing and communication strategy for yourself. So I like to put it in plain terms. Marketing is all about how you reach your target audience. So what that means is that marketing is about understanding, first of all, who is your pool of supporters? how large is that group? How large is that population? In order to understand how large your market is, you have to know what defines that market. So where do they live? Who are they? We're going to go into some detail about how to identify who that target market is in a couple of slides after this one. But when you think about marketing, you're always thinking about understanding who you're trying to reach and understanding how to get your content and your product or service in front of them. What are the different channels to reach them most effectively? And what do you need to create in order to act in those channels? So marketing is about how you reach your target audience, and it's about how you capture their attention. You want to capture the attention of the right people. So once you know who they are, how do you make sure that they then know who you are? So we're going to talk about that. But branding is about how you connect with your target audience. So what I mean by that is that branding is about building a relationship once you have their attention. You want to do something meaningful with people's attention once you have it. So that's why I was saying earlier, it's not enough to just invest in advertising, because if you put an ad out there and the content is not compelling, it's not speaking to the people that you want to speak to, it's not clear about the call to action, then it's really wasteful. So what you want to do is figure out, once you have people's attention, how do you keep them connected to you? And that's something that manifests through your brand visuals. So what's the mood and the feeling that you're creating through the type of photography that you post, or through the color palette and fonts that you choose? There's a message in every single piece of visual material that you put out on behalf of your brand. So you want to always be very thoughtful about that. That's part of building a relationship with your audience. Other ways that you build a relationship with your audience are through how you speak to them. So you want to think about the tone of voice that you use when you write captions for social media, or when you write blog posts or emails to your audience. Do they feel like you're talking directly to them? Do they feel like they understand who the person is behind the brand? All of these things are the ways that you build a connection with your audience, which ultimately makes them more inclined to trust you to do what it is you want them to do, whether that's purchase something, sign up for something, attend an event, whatever that call to action is. They're more likely to do that if they feel like they have a connection with you as a brand. And so that's the difference between branding and marketing. You can think about marketing as a very strategic and oftentimes quantitative approach to your strategy. You can think about branding as more of a qualitative approach to your strategy. It's a storytelling platform. It's how you let people know who you are. So as you go into building a strategy for marketing and branding, keep those distinctions in mind. Okay. Next, when you think about defining your brand, you really want to think about who your audience is, because at the end of the day, if your idea is really great, then that means that it's going to add value to someone else's life. And you have to be able to prove that you're creating something that actually holds value to your audience. So the best way to start to understand that for yourself is to identify who your target audience is. And when I say this, I don't just mean thinking about the high level demographic information, right? So don't just think, oh, my audience, they're between the ages of 16 and 65 years old, and they really could be anybody, because what I'm creating could be beneficial for anyone. Oftentimes, that's one of the key mistakes that many entrepreneurs or brand owners make, is that they think that their reach is so far and wide that they miss an opportunity to really cultivate a relationship with the people who need their offer the most. So when you think about the question of who your target audience is, I want you to think about, where do they live? What are their lifestyle habits? What sorts of professions do they work in? What are their value systems? Do they have families? Are they single? Do they fit a particular cultural or ethnic group? So you really want to start thinking as detailed as possible with that question. Then I want you to determine, what is the action that you want your audience to take? So sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that we just have to put information out about our business or our brand. We just have to tell people that we exist, right? But that's only the first part of reaching out to your audience. You want to make sure that you're always being very clear about what you want them to do with that information. And it doesn't always have to be a direct sale. It may not be that you always want them to buy something right away, or sign up for something, or attend something. It might be that you want to just make sure that they follow you on social media and that they tell their friends to follow you too. that in and of itself is a call to action. And that sort of thing is important no matter what kind of communication you put out, even if you're just telling a story about yourself or your brand that you're excited about. It's always a good idea to end your caption or your content by telling the audience what you want them to do next with that information. Then I really want you to figure out where your target audience accesses information, ideas, and products. Because ultimately, you want to meet your audience where they are. Yes, it's absolutely important that you have a website and that you have some sort of online destination that you're trying to drive traffic to so that people find all of the information that they need to about your brand. But you want to get in front of where they are first. So if your target audience is spending most of their time on Facebook, then you want to really spend some time developing a strategy for that platform. But maybe your target audience doesn't really spend a whole lot of time on social media. Maybe they're not as digitally savvy, they're a little bit older, and due to the changes in our culture because of COVID-19, they're just starting to adapt to the digital space. That's something you want to be mindful of as well. Because, for instance, if your audience is new to the digital space, they may need a little bit more instruction about how to find your website, how to find your social media, how to RSVP to your Zoom event. So you always want to keep in mind who you're talking to and where and how they access information, and make sure that you're catering to that. Then you want to think about why they would support you versus other choices. So, of course, it's important as any sort of business or brand to understand the competitive landscape, right? Who are the competitors in your field, in your category? And you want to think about not only who offers something similar to what you offer, but also who is talking directly to an audience that is similar to your target audience. Excuse me. And as you develop an understanding for who those competitors are and what they're doing in this space, you want to always be thinking about how do you differentiate yourself from them? How do you offer something different that's valuable that would make somebody more inclined to choose your brand or your offer over the other options on the table? And then lastly, you want to find out how to get in front of your target audience. So this is a direct follow up to the part about finding out where they access information. If you do discover that your target audience is accessing information primarily on Facebook, for instance, then the question of how do you get in front of them is about developing some clear, actionable tactics to make sure that you have a presence on that platform. So that could be that you make a commitment that whenever you host a virtual event, then you always create a Facebook event that drives to that link. That sounds like it's obvious to some, but to many, that's easy to forget. Sometimes we get so caught up in sharing the link directly to our website or to the digital destination we want to drive people to that we forget to utilize these other platforms as marketing channels to bring people there. One thing that's important to note, and this might come into play later in the conversation too, is that a platform like Facebook doesn't like for people to share links that link out to a different site. Okay. Facebook always wants to keep people on their platform for as long as they possibly can. That's a benefit to them. So it benefits you to create a Facebook event and drive traffic to there if you're going to use Facebook to promote yourself, rather than trying to link out to your own website. And that's just because the Facebook analytics would rather show a link to their own Facebook event than showing people something that links out to your website. So it has an effect on how many people get to see your content, being that strategic about how you market it and use those channels. So that's just a quick tip. I don't want to get into too much detail because we got a lot more to cover, but this is how you want to think about defining your target audience. Kind of diving into that a little bit deeper. Here's some questions that you want to ask when it comes to understanding the audience that you serve. Oftentimes, we're going to serve more than one kind of audience segment. Maybe we provide services that reach different people or that different groups would find valuable. So if that's the case, you really want to understand what each of those segments are that your brand or your product or service serves. So one question you can ask yourself is your audience made up of individuals or institutions? So for instance, if you're a nonprofit organization, then it may be that you provide a service that is a benefit to a certain group of individuals. Certain individual audience members might come to you to patronize your nonprofit, but you might also have a goal of recruiting donations from corporations, right? So in that case, another audience segment for you is going to be institutions. The way that you market to individuals versus institutions is going to be a little bit different. You'll want to tailor your language a little bit in your email communications. You'll want to have specific key messages that you share with donors that are going to be different from the key messages that you share with your individual audience members. So that's one thing that you want to be clear about before you even begin marketing is who are you marketing to and how do you need to serve them differently? Then you want to ask key questions like, where is your audience located? Do you serve a local audience? Even in a digital platform, you want to be clear about the geographic location of your audience. Because like I mentioned, this presentation is all about how to engage people organically first, but as your brand grows, you are going to want to utilize some paid advertisement. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it's going to be some. And when you get to that point, you're going to want to define your audience so that you have the best possible chance of reaching a targeted group of folks who are really looking for what you have to offer. So you want to know where they live. You also want to know what are their interests and values. This day and age, it is very important that brands connect with the things that audiences care about. A lot of folks who are using digital platforms are socially engaged. They are up to date on current events and they're looking for information about who the leaders are of the brands and endeavors that they support. So you're going to want to know what are the interests and values of the people that you're trying to sell. Make sure that they're aligned with the way that you're presenting yourself and the core values of your brand. You want to speak your audience's language. And so it's important to know what they care about and what they believe in as you do that. And then lastly, a great question to make sure you have an answer to is what influences your audience's choices? What really makes a difference in whether somebody purchases something from you, signs up to your event, or doesn't? So some things to know about that. Just in general tips, a lot of times people do not respond to the first time they see some sort of advertisement or promotional material. Many times people have to encounter a promotion for the same event 6 different times before they end up taking the action that that promotion called for. So that means that you have to get very comfortable with promoting the hell out of your event. Excuse my language, but let's just be candid about it. You have to get comfortable putting up several posts on social media, sending out more than one email, and reaching out to your network of promotional partners to make sure that you're hitting people as often as you can in order to yield the response that you're looking for. So you want to know what influences people's choices. One, it's how many times they see a promotion for something, but it also might be word of mouth, especially in like the Black community, for instance. Word of mouth marketing is a key tool for us. So if people are going to be more inclined to take a call to action seriously, if they're referred to that, or if they hear it from somebody else that they trust in their social network, then you want to keep that in mind so that you can think about how to utilize partnerships more. So those are some ways that understanding what influences your audience's choices will help you develop a better strategy for marketing. So it's not just throwing something out into all the noise of the internet and hoping that it catches. You can become really deliberate about what you do. So as you are continuing to build your business, a lot of more established organizations and brands will invest in some market research eventually, where they'll actually spend some time, some money, and ask professional help to do focus groups or audience surveys or things to better understand their audience based on data and analytics. Now, if you're just starting out and that's not a feasible investment for you, that makes total sense. But it doesn't mean that you don't have access to market research and that you can't do some things to deliberately understand your audience from a more data-based perspective. So here are 3 tips that I have for how to do your own market research and build that into the way that you do your marketing strategy. 1, read articles about trends in your particular industry. There are so many online publications, print publications that talk about business in general, or that talk about nonprofits, or that talk about entertainment. You want to make it a habit to constantly be educating yourself about what's currently going on in your competitive landscape. And so that could be as simple as creating a habit where 3 times a week you start your morning by reading an article about your industry. I guarantee you there's no way that you take that habit up and you don't walk away inspired and better educated about how to navigate your field. So it's a tip that I would really take seriously. The second tip that is super important when it comes to market research is to ask for feedback from past customers and supporters of yours. Just ask them directly. And there are some great tools to kind of streamline this request for feedback. For example, you could send out a digital survey using a platform like SurveyMonkey, and you could ask specific questions to your audience, including the basics like that demographic information we talked about earlier. So ask people, where do they live? How do they identify? What are, what do they do for a living? You can ask things like that, anything that would help you better understand that. But this is a better tool for understanding how your audience sees you and your brand and what they need from you. So use a tool like that to ask people what type of content they would like to see from you on social media. What did they enjoy most about your last event? What kind of blog post would they like to see from your platform? Whatever it may be, just ask people directly. People are always willing to offer up their opinion. And then lastly, on this tip for market research, you want to follow and study like-minded brands and competitors. And I mean, subscribe to their email mailing list, follow them across social media. One of the things that I like to do whenever I'm working on a new project or working with a new client is to make a list, just like a spreadsheet or a Google Doc, make a list of other similar brands, similar not only in terms of what their product or offer is, but similar in terms of their voice, their personality, who seems to be their target audience. Make a list of those brands and then just spend some time following them all on social media so that you can start to keep an eye naturally on what other folks in your category are doing. The more that you do this, the better you will start to understand how to position yourself in the landscape of your competitors. And this is all cost-free stuff that you can do in place of market research until you have the resources or the interest in investing in some more professional support. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is online reach and how to determine what the best platform is for growing your online audience in the digital space. I just wanted to put some numbers up here really quickly to show you what the size of the audience is on each of these prominent social media platforms. So on Instagram, globally, there are 4.1 billion users on that platform. Instagram is a huge social media platform. And frankly, whether you like it or not, whether it's your favorite platform or not, it is a great idea for any brand to have a profile on Instagram. Now, that does not mean that you have to post to Instagram twice a day, that you've got to manage the community on there and be a master at it. It just means that you need to have a presence there because many statistics are showing that a lot of people will go and look for a brand on Instagram before they will even go to Google and look for the website. So once again, it goes back to meeting people where they are. If they're already there looking for you, you want to make sure that you're present when they go looking. Facebook is another huge platform, as we know. There are 2.6 billion users on Facebook. Facebook is a great platform for specific types of marketing. It's great for event marketing. It's great for community building in the online space. So if you're going to be really actively dialoguing with your audience, then Facebook is a great platform for that. It's also a platform that reaches a slightly broader age range. So if you're looking for people who are more classic social media users, who are more in that kind of 35 to 55 age range, Facebook is a great platform to be on. You want to set up a page there. TikTok is a rising social media platform. Of course, we've all seen the TikTok dance videos, and it's a great platform for some very strategic marketing. But since it's newer, it's also very experimental. There are 800 million users on TikTok right now. And then lastly, Twitter has 262 million users. So Twitter continues to be a great social media platform, especially if you prefer written content or you are going to do a lot of blogging, or your content is a lot less visual. Twitter is a great platform to entertain as a core focus for your brand. So it's just good to know what the audience size is on each of these platforms. Now, I'll also mention the biggest audience for the social media platform doesn't necessarily have to correlate to who your target audience is. So always what's key is knowing who it is you're trying to speak to and where they spend their time. If they're not spending their time on TikTok, then you don't need to spend your time on TikTok. If they're not spending their time on Instagram, then you don't need to focus so much attention on that. But you want to always be strategic about where you're spending your time. A lot of entrepreneurs who are new to marketing just think that they need to have a presence everywhere and don't go into it with any sort of strategy, and they lose an opportunity to make an impact. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now I want to talk about the key online channels to use for marketing and branding. Social media is not the only way that we should be using the online space for our brand. So I included 4 key areas here that are important for your holistic online brand experience. One is, of course, social media platforms, which we just talked about. One thing that I want to make sure to point out is that when you're building your brand on social media, try as best you can to secure the same handle across every single social media platform that you have a presence on. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes your brand name is going to be available on one platform and it's not going to be available on another. Do your best to come up with some sort of alternative where you can be consistent across all platforms. If that's not easy to do, then just use your best judgment about having a handle that's easy to remember and that's simple, and that people will be able to find easily. So that's one tip for your social media platforms, but that's important to be on there. But another very important online platform that people often take for granted is your email subscription form. So as much as possible, you want people to be signing up for an email list so that you have a direct line of communication to the people who are most engaged with your brand. Because an email list is a commitment, right? If we sign up for an email list, then we are giving a brand permission to clutter up our inboxes with whatever messaging they deem appropriate. So if somebody signs up for your email subscription list, that means that they are genuinely interested in what it is you have to say. And you really want to spend most of your time talking to people who are genuinely interested in what you have to say. So there's a couple of ways that you can develop an email subscription form. If you have a website and you created it using any sort of drag and drop website platform like Squarespace or Wix or any of those, there should be some very simple solutions for incorporating an email subscription form. But you can also just use a platform like MailChimp, and create a landing page that you can direct people to capture their email addresses. So either way, explore your options for having an email subscription form, because email is also the highest converting form of digital marketing, which means that when you have a call to action for your audience and you put it as a button in an email that you send out, there's more likelihood that somebody is going to click that button in your email than there's a likelihood that they're going to click on an Instagram post that has that same core messaging. And it's just because, like I said, you're talking to people who have already signed up to hear from you and want to know what it is you have to say. Another important piece that I think we all know is important to have, but we don't often think about how it's used these days, but that's a website or a landing page. So the key here is that you want to purchase the domain name, whatever your website URL is, that goes with your brand name. You want to snatch that up as soon as possible, as soon as you have an idea and a business underway or a project underway. Get that domain name. And then you want to connect that domain name to a website that has all of the key information about your brand that people are going to go looking for when they find out about you. So it should be very easy on your website for people to find out what your endeavor is about, how it started, who the team is behind that endeavor, how they can get in touch with you, and what the services are that you offer and who you offer them for. And of course, you can add all sorts of things to a website to make it have more rich content. You can add blog, you can add photos. There's lots you can do there, but I want to make sure that people prioritize putting the most important information that folks are looking for on that website. Think of your website as a digital headquarters for your brand. If I show up to your headquarters, I should be able to find the information that I need, and I should be able to find the leaders of that headquarters, right? So that is how you should think about your website or landing page. Another thing to note is that what's most important with the website is that it's easy to use and that it's clean and beautiful and simple to access information. Don't get too caught up in packing your homepage with too much content that's hard to navigate, because the truth of the matter is a lot of people are going to encounter your brand through one of these other digital platforms before they even make it to your website. So use it as a place that's a clean, pleasant experience for whoever is viewing it. And then the last thing that I want to mention in terms of online channels is promotional partnerships. This is not something that I think comes up a lot when we talk about digital marketing, but Promotional partnerships to me incorporates any sort of agreements that you have with existing online brands to help promote your content. So for instance, if you're hosting an event and you have speakers featured in that event, or you're going to be a part of something with several participants, there should be some sort of agreement in place where everybody has the content that they need to share that same event on their respective social channels. That sort of promotional partnership allows you to reach an audience that you don't already have contact with. You always want to leverage other people's reach, other people's community and audience when you can, so long as it correlates to that target audience that you know you're trying to reach. If there's somebody out there already speaking to that target demographic, get in touch with them. Tell them about what you're doing and share with them easy graphic assets and suggested writing or copy so that it's easy for them to spread the word about what you're doing. Because like I mentioned, for certain demographics, especially, word of mouth advertising is going to be your best friend when it comes to marketing. So you want to make it easy for people to spread the word about what you're doing. So the online channels you need to make sure that you're checking out and that you have a place in are social media platforms, email subscription forms, a website or a landing page, and promotional partnerships. And we are blazing through, and then I'm going to open it up to questions in just a few. So I'm a creative, right? I love the visuals. I love the storytelling. That's the part of marketing and branding that I first fell in love with. The part that I wasn't originally in love with was analytics and tracking performance of marketing. I have never identified as being strong in math. And so for me, this was an area of opportunity when I got involved in marketing, was to figure out how to capture data that makes a difference and that supports what I want to do on the creative end. So you always want to be tracking the performance of your marketing. And if that's something that's kind of out of your league or that you're not super comfortable with, these are the 5 key metrics I encourage folks to capture every 3 weeks on behalf of their brands. And they're super easy to capture. So 1, you just want to keep a bullet point list of what the key messages or content themes were that you focused on during that 3-week time period. You can start this whenever. I recommend starting it as soon as you start doing any communications on behalf of your brand. What did you talk to your audience about over the past 3 weeks? What were the key things that you wanted to drive their attention to? Keep track of that in just a simple bullet point list. Then what I want you to capture is your total follower count across all of your social media profiles. Just go to your profiles and see what your follower count is and add them all together. And that'll give you a sense of how large your audience is during that time period. Then you want to take note of how many email subscribers you have. And then 4th, you want to take note of what social media posts got the highest engagement on your social media platforms. And if you have a business account for Instagram or for Facebook, these sorts of insights are available to you. You just have to click on insights in your platform and it'll show you information like what was the reach of your post, how many people saw it, how many actions were taken on this post, how many people clicked or left a comment, and you'll see that kind of information. And there's a lot of it provided within the platforms. What you want to do is identify which of those data points is most meaningful to you, so that you're not pressuring yourself to always capture this full scope of social media analytics, but just get a couple of data points that you can keep an eye on so that you can track your growth over time. You also want to take note of which posts got the lowest engagement. And as you start to pay attention to these things over time, you'll see, okay, so people really like this. They're not really loving this so much. So let me do more of that. And that's how you become better at marketing your brand and ultimately become better at maintaining a great relationship with your audience. I wanted to include a couple of tips for having engaging content on social media, because like I said, no matter how much money you spend on advertising, no matter how often you post, if the audience doesn't love it, if the audience doesn't have a great impression of your brand as a result of it, then it's not serving you well. So here are some key tips to making sure that you're keeping your quality high when it comes to your content. 1, when you're sharing photos or graphics on social media or your website or any part of your digital brand, make sure that you are using high resolution, high quality photography. you don't always have to have your own original photography created. There are some areas where you're going to definitely want some original photography. Like if you are the founder or the leader or the team of this endeavor, you're going to want to make sure that you have high quality headshots that are current of you and your team that you can share on your website and social media platforms. But outside of that, you may want to just show lifestyle photography, which is, photography that is just kind of candid, photography that shows that represents the audience that you serve, things to kind of mix up your content so that it's not all promotional. You can always source high quality stock photos from various different websites across the internet now. And there's no shame in that. So if you can source great stock photos that tie into your brand look and feel, that's a better option than posting photos from your own collection that are low resolution, that are blurry, that are not super top notch, because over time that's going to start to really put a damper on your overall brand experience. And it makes a difference to how your audience engages. You also want to make sure that your brand has a cohesive look and feel. So one tip for doing that, just put very simply, is to identify 4 to 5 complementary brand colors and 2 fonts that show up consistently in all of your marketing materials. Get that palette together and stick to that palette. And that way, as you continue to create more content, as you continue to promote different events, it always ties back to a cohesive look and feel, really makes a difference in the experience of the viewer. Then I want you to remember to tell stories. Sometimes we get so caught up in pushing and selling to the audience that we forget that we're all human beings, and what we relate to most is good storytelling. So tell me the story of what made you come up with this business or endeavor. Tell me the story of a connection that you had with a customer or a good experience that your customers had with you. Tell me a story about how you came up with your latest campaign or product. People want to know, and that's what makes them interested and excited about what you're doing. So make sure that as you're developing content for your social media feeds, that you make sure that storytelling is a key part of that. And then last tip for engaging content, feature your fans, celebrate, congratulate, highlight the people who support you. One way to do this is to create a graphic with testimonials from your customers or supporters talking about how they've benefited from what you offer. Create a graphic, throw it up on social media. It's a great way for other people who are not a part of your audience yet to see that there are folks out there in the real world who will vouch for you and who believe in and get value from what you're doing. So that's always a good look. You also want to include any sorts of casual quotes that you get from people that you serve. As a consultant, I oftentimes get like text messages or quick emails from my clients just saying, hey, I want you to know like how much I appreciate you and the work that you've done for us so far. That not only means a lot to me, it is proof and verification that what I'm doing adds value. And so it's always okay to throw that sort of thing up on your digital marketing channels. Don't cite anybody unless you ask for permission from them first, but it's a great way to show people that you're making an impact and get them interested in what you're doing. And now I want to open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand it over to Angel, who's going to help me moderate this part.
Hello, hello. What a great workshop. So our first question is on YouTube, and there's a bit of a delay just between the Zoom and YouTube, just so you're aware. Okay. The first question is, are there any other social media platforms that you recommend?
Okay, so yes, there are lots of social media platforms. The primary ones that I recommend that all brands be on or at least explore are my kind of top 3: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I would say in terms of having a consistent presence on a social media platform, those are still going to be the most important, but you can explore even channels like Slack or Meetup. These are like social networking platforms. So it's less about just having kind of a broad public audience and more about creating community in the digital space. There are channels like that that are great for like event marketing, for instance. So if you're looking for other alternative social media platforms, a great way to go about it is to say, what is it that I'm trying to promote? And then just Google like event marketing platform or Google like webinar marketing platform, and you'll start to see some of your different options for channels. But I would say the most important ones are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to be on consistently.
Perfect. And for those of us in the Zoom call, if you have a question and want to just put the hand raise button, I will forward your question. We have another question from YouTube, which is, how often should I post things to all platforms? Is there a recommended amount of traffic? And then I got clarification. So a recommended amount of posts, or how often to post?
Yes, that's a good question, a really common question. So there are some different kind of best practices for each platform. In general, I aim to post on Instagram 4 to 5 times a week. And I would aim to post on Facebook closer to 3 times a week. A good rule of thumb, if you're just trying to get into a rhythm, is to try to make sure that you're posting something every other day to Instagram, and 2 to 3 times a week to Facebook is my kind of rule of thumb. I treat Twitter very similarly to how I treat Facebook. But one other thing that I'll point out about Twitter is that Twitter is a great platform for reposting other people's content. All of these platforms are great for reposting other content, but I find that if you want to keep your Twitter populated, it's so simple to retweet. Just start following hashtags that relate to your brand values or the things that you care about in your company or that relate to what you're doing, and use that as an opportunity to repost. And that also takes some pressure off of you for having to generate new posts. But yeah, for Instagram, I would say 4 to 5 times a week is what I aim for. Facebook, 2 to 3 times a week. And also, this sort of information is constantly changing as the nature of social media changes. So you can always just Google really quickly, what are the best practices for posting on these platforms. But I recommend to folks that you focus instead on what works best for your lifestyle and capacity, and just focus on consistency first. And you'll learn over time what your audience really responds to in terms of cadence and frequency.
Fantastic. So this is a question from my own mind. Can you just talk a little bit about rebranding? So what about businesses that have been established that have not been doing so great in the branding and marketing space? What do we do?
Yes, rebranding is a big topic. So I think that the first thing that folks need to do when they're considering whether or not they need to rebrand is to try to do kind of an audit of your current brand. And so the best way to go about that is to incorporate some of the tips that I brought up, namely asking for feedback from your audience. So the first thing that I would do before embarking on a rebrand is create a short survey that you can send out to as a digital link to your current audience. Now, I recognize that if a business is smaller and hasn't really grown a huge online audience yet, that might be a very small pool of people. But nonetheless, if you've been established for a while, then you do have a way to reach folks. So find a way to send folks a survey. And the first thing I would do is get that immediate feedback from the people who are already supporting you. Ask them what's working for them currently, what would they like to see more of, what would benefit them. Once you have an understanding of how your existing follower group feels about what you're offering, that might provide you some insight into how you could expand that audience. When people learn a lot from those surveys, especially if you include an opportunity for people to leave a short written note about their own recommendations, you'll hear directly what you need to improve upon. That's going to give you some insight into the first thing that you need to do with your rebrand. So a rebrand could consist of redesigning your entire logo and brand identity and color palette and getting a whole new visual brand going. But sometimes a rebrand could just call for a brand refresh. Maybe you don't need to completely redesign all of your assets, but you just need to make them a little bit more modern and work with a creative vendor to kind of freshen them up for the online space. So it'll be helpful to first know what are the problem areas, to make sure that you're really solving for those. Then as you think about a rebrand, you want to think about how you're going to introduce that to your audience. And your audience is going to be made up of people who already support you and new people who are just getting exposed to you. So the most important thing about rolling out a rebrand is telling the right story. In that story, you want to remind people about who you are and what you've been doing. What's the legacy that you've already built with this business? What are some of the highlights that you have experienced thus far? Always speak in the positive so that people know this is an evolution. It's not a problem solve. Once you kind of shared that story, then you want to give people a really forward thinking description of why you're rebranding, and say things like, we recognize that there was an opportunity to reach you better, or we realized that we were really not speaking directly to the folks who benefit most from us. So for that reason, introducing blah, blah, blah. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to take people along with you on that journey. And that way you're building a great relationship with folks who are new to you, but also maintaining the relationship with folks who are not new to you and you don't alienate them. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And we have questions pouring in from YouTube. So print media, is that over? And and then I think we can tie this into that question. How do ad purchases really work? You mentioned target market. Is that the key, or is there more to it?
Both really good questions. So I'll start with the print media piece. Print media is not over. I, for one, absolutely love creating print collateral. The thing is, you have to be creative about it these days. There are a lot of new brands coming out that absolutely incorporate like print media, but it's always very well designed now. And it's treated more like a special touch between the brand and their customer than it is an essential piece of marketing. So what I mean by that is like e-commerce, for instance. Many people who have e-commerce brands who are shipping out products to people through the online space, they don't just ship the product now, in a box with nothing else. They also will send a little sometimes they'll send a handwritten note from the founder, or sometimes a pre-printed note that sounds like it's directly from the voice of the people who created the product. Things like that are the way that you should be using print collateral now to make a very special impression on your audience. It's still important too, to have like posters out around town if you're promoting an event, or to have flyers available. But I think it's just always important to make sure that those things look and feel like something people really want to pick up. Like, I'm very thoughtful not only about what information is on a piece of print material, but what's the texture of that paper? What's the color palette of that? How is it going to stand out when it's just like sitting on a windowsill amongst other flyers? So print media is totally in. There's a way to do it right. There's a way to do it well. But if you're going to invest in it, make sure that it's something that people are going to want to hold on to. For the question about digital advertising. So the key with digital advertising is, and I'll talk about it specifically through the lens of like Facebook and Instagram, because that's where I do most of my advertising. And it's the most kind of low hanging fruit for kind of upstart entrepreneurs. What you want to understand, and the reason it's so key to know how you define your audience, is because when you go into Facebook and you decide to boost a post or create a specific ad, it's going to ask you to define your target audience. And you want to be able to answer questions like, what are their interests? What's the age range? Are you trying to attract male audience members, female audience members, or both? And it's also going to ask you what the call to action is that you want. So do you want to point them to your website? Whatever it is that you want them to do. When you create those standards for that audience, Facebook is going to spit out a number that says, this is how many people you have the potential to reach with this ad. It's not a guarantee that you'll reach that many people. It's just, this is how many people fit the description that you put up. So that's going to be the most important thing, because the more specific and targeted you can get about that audience, the better chance you have that people are going to respond to the engagement. I will also say that when you're first starting out with advertising, it's not an exact science. So you want to put $20 here, $15 there to just see how things start performing. You could, for instance, create an ad where you're saying, okay, I'm going to put $20 on this advertisement for the next 5 days, and launch it and put it out there. And then when you get those results back, it's important to take a look at what your potential audience reach was, and then how many people you actually ended up reaching. If there's a big discrepancy in those two numbers, you want to think about if there's something you could improve in your content, or maybe you're not targeting the right audience. So it's always a learning opportunity. So you want to really consider digital advertising as testing ground. And like I mentioned on the last slide about tracking your metrics, it's important to kind of look at that performance and see where you can improve for your next ad.
Perfect. Along with that last question, and you kind of answered it, but is there like a biggest bang for your buck? You know, is one platform a better investment than another, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think because it's not a one size fit all, that's difficult to answer. But what I will say, and just as a reminder to something I think I mentioned during the workshop, is that the biggest bang for your buck is going to be email marketing. And so what you may want to do is create a social ad that is pointing people to sign up to your email list. So if you have a landing page where you're pulling in email subscribers, or if it's on your website or something, it might be strategic for you to create an Instagram ad or a Facebook ad that where the call to action is to sign up for your subscriber list. Because ultimately, the more people that you get on that list, the more people you can speak to through a channel that you actually have some ownership over. So if you have an email list, that information, people are giving that information to you directly, and you do what you want to with that in the way that you want to when you deliver emails, versus Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of these platforms. They're awesome so long as they're working, so long as they're not blocking your content, so long as the algorithm is in your favor. So the more that you can do to draw your data and your audience data outside of those platforms into your own possession, that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck and the best investment.
Perfect. I just want to pause real quick before this next question, and thank you. Oh my gosh, you're like,
thank you.
You're giving us so much game in this workshop.
That's what we're here for.
I know. So the next question is, any absolute don'ts when building your brand?
I mean, tons. There are tons of absolute don'ts, but there's a few that I personally kind of hold on to for my motto. One is I try to steer away from using the term competitor or competition, and I try to shift towards like-minded brands or like-minded companies. And the reason that I say that is because one thing that I think is a real don't when you're building your brand is to constantly publicly compare yourself to the alternative options in a way that inspires people to pit what you do up against what they do. So when we think about positioning, when it comes to branding, you want it to be clear to people why you're the best choice, but you want to make clear without having to draw else into that conversation. So my key don't when branding is to speak in the negative about any of your competitors, or to speak about anybody else's shortcomings or your own shortcomings. Focus on what you do best and focus on why that makes a difference and why that's important. Another don't when building your brand, do not try to go to market before you're ready. So if you don't have a keen understanding of who you're talking to, what you offer, and not just what you offer, but how you're going to deliver that at a high quality, then you're not ready yet. So the customer experience is very important to me. A lot of what doesn't get talked about in a lot of dialogue about branding right now is customer satisfaction and customer experience. We talk a lot about graphics and visuals and copy and all of that kind of sexy romantic stuff. But what matters at the end of the day is the reputation that you have among the people who are actually paying you or patronizing what you do. So you want to have systems in place before you launch anything to make sure that they're having a great experience. So if you're going to launch a digital event or something, then you want to make sure that you know exactly how people are going to sign up for that. They have all the information they need, and that if there's somebody they need to talk to directly, that you're able to be responsive to that, etc. So a lot of times, if we're too much in a rush to draw attention to ourselves and our brand, then we don't remember to cross some of the T's and dot some of the I's with the full experience. So I like to just remind people that your reputation is key first and foremost.
Thank you for that. So would you suggest, if you're saying that people need to have a very clear understanding of their branding strategy before they start, is it worth the investment? And should we speak to branding professionals first, or should we try to go at it alone and bring somebody on later? Like what's the best strategy there?
That's a really good question. So I would say if you're just getting started, my recommendation is that if you have first off, create a clear list of whatever your questions are. Forums like this are fantastic because people have an opportunity to just say, these are my specific questions and get a direct answer. I would say, don't wait for a forum like this to do that. If you have questions about branding and marketing, write down what those questions are. When it comes to pursuing the answers, there's a lot of great articles for first-time entrepreneurs, blog posts, what have you, just on the internet. You could start by just searching for a blog post to answer that specific question. And a lot of it is not written with fancy marketing jargon. It's not intended for folks in the industry. It's intended for everyday business people, because more and more folks are starting to show up in this space and do their thing. So there's some great resources available on the internet just for general questions. If you have deeper questions, more specific questions about your company and what you're doing and how to get started, I recommend that you contact a branding professional to just set up a 1-hour consultation, half-hour to 1-hour consultation. And just do it Q&A style if they allow that. That's something that I offer through Worthi. Just set up some time to talk to somebody and say, and even if the question is, I have no idea where to get started, tell me what to do, then you can have one consultation for that. Once you have that conversation, you'll have a better sense of what you need to focus on within the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to get your branding and marketing off the ground. And you'll figure out whether that's something that you can handle yourself or that's something that you need some help with. What's really key when you're recruiting the help of creative or marketing professionals is knowing what type of professional help you need. So sometimes we need a brand designer, somebody who can really get the color palette and the identity together, but we think we need a web developer, and you end up investing in a web developer to create a website for you that you can't even maintain yourself, and you still are kind of left, out of luck. So I think the key there is to know what your questions are, contact somebody for just a general conversation, and then develop a short-term plan for what you need to do first and identify specific professionals for those needs.
Fantastic. Well, we want to respect your time. It is 1 o'clock. What an amazing workshop. Thank you so much for being with us for Juneteenth week 2020. And fantastic workshop.
I'll just wrap it up by saying, feel free to go to worthycreative.com. That's WORTHI creative.com, or you can follow Worthi on all of the social medias at worthy.creative. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.